to be frank, they're both lunatics, and I believe they're both unfit candidates, and they only care to protect the ruling class interests, not my interests, not my friends' interests, not the people I surround myself with, like community interests. So yeah, I just wouldn't feel comfortable supporting any of them.
To say there's a high level of disenchantment with Presidents Biden and Trump among 16 independent Wisconsin students would be the understatement of the year. 6 of these 16 would not vote in a two-way race between these candidates. In a five-way race, their thinking shifts. Here's how they'd vote: 3 would take Biden, 2 would take Trump, 7 would take RFK Jr., 2 would take Cornel West, and 2 would take Jill Stein. But here's what's really important: only 3 of the 16 say they are paying a lot of attention to the presidential race. To give you a sense of the uphill battle both candidates face, here's the first word or phrase that comes to mind when they think of President Biden.
Ice cream.
Sleepy.
Old.
Cooper took mine, but old.
Inadequate.
Old.
White.
Placeholder.
Dementia.
Loony.
I'd say demented.
Incapable.
I thought old immediately.
Wishy-washy.
Not really a descriptive word, but I just thought of nursing home.
Gray-haired.
Then there's this.
He says that he's going to do things and then never delivers.
He doesn't seem mentally fit, and he also hasn't really done a lot.
I just feel like he isn't doing anything really. Like he's kind of just there.
I didn't really see change throughout when he's like through our economy or like the US at all when he's been in office. There hasn't been that many like big news stories coming of all the things he's done for the country.
By a show of fingers, who would say that you think President Biden has not done a good job telling the public about his achievements in office? Show of fingers, who feels that way? 6 of you. Meanwhile, here are the first words or phrases that come to mind when they think of former President Trump.
Hatred.
Radical.
Pedophile.
Womanizer.
Bigoted.
Orange.
Erratic.
Businessman.
Deranged.
Loudest in the room.
Orange.
Insurrection.
Orange, actually.
Direct.
This man.
Perhaps one way of divining how they'll actually vote comes from the question of which scenario worries them more: 4 more years of Trump or 4 more years of Biden. 11 said 4 more years of Trump, while 5 said Biden. But we should not discount the possible impact of third-party candidates. As you saw earlier, 7 of the 16 would take Robert Kennedy Jr. in a 5-way race. Here's why.
He just seems, out of the 3, to be more libertarian and a lot less controversial. I think he has a chance to be a lot less divisive and radical than the other 2 and more competent maybe.
Also, Joe Biden and Trump also both have chances already, and they're not doing so hot.
For me, it's because he seems more level-headed and middle of the road. Plus, he's the only candidate that I've actually seen discuss housing prices and like my generation's issue with that. And then he's the only one I've heard from numerous coworkers that tell me about policies that he would put in place and stuff like that.
I can't think of a lot off the top of my head, but it does seem like he's trying to bring in change. I believe I saw on X the other day or recently that he was talking about Black women's mortality rates in the hospital and talking about needing a change for that. Can't remember the details exactly, but he just seems like a much better option than Biden or Trump.
I'm not super familiar in depth with his policies, but his website's values seem all right. They're not in depth policy wise as I would like, but he's not Biden, he's not Trump. I think both presidents have done some bad for this country, so I'd like to see what a non-Democrat or Republican president can do.
I know specifically he wants to prevent big corporations like BlackRock and Vanguard, who are on track to buy, I don't remember the statistic, but it's like 60% of the affordable housing. And these big corporations are just, with all their buying power, just driving up the housing market and making it basically impossible for like people like me who are going to graduate college soon and be able to own a home.
With protests over the war in Israel and Gaza roiling universities across America, our timing was perfect to hear what these students, all of whom are enrolled at different campuses in the University of Wisconsin system, said about this topic. Half indicated that this issue is the one in the news that concerns them the most. Nearly all of them indicated that they support the protests. Here's why.
I've mostly been seeing the ones that are happening on campus. And I think it's completely unfair for students who are paying tuition to not have a say in where their money goes, especially if it's going to fund Israel's crimes. So that's from a more like grassroots level, but on a bigger scale, it's just indiscriminate bombing and war, and the deaths have just not been equal on both sides.
I guess I would say I don't know too much about the protests, but I am an avid supporter of protest in general, and so if it's a protest, I support it because that's people's rights to protest.
I feel like I've had a lot of really mixed views about this because I have really conservative parents, but I'm around a lot of liberal people. So I feel like at first I was like supporting Israel, but then I feel like the more that I learned about it, I'm like, this just needs to end, and like we need to stop killing people and hurting people. And I feel like supporting Gaza or Palestine is going to be the easiest way to get to do that and go about that.
I think the protests are very empowering to see a lot of young people on these campuses like rising up together in solidarity with Gaza and the Palestinian people that are being killed and genocided by the IOF. And I think it's bringing a lot of awareness that I think the mainstream media outlets kind of tend to misconstrue about like what's been really going on in that region for the past 70 years. So I think it's really educational as well.
With that context, we wanted to understand how deeply they support this cause. So I posed this question. How come none of you are living in the tents?
I just cannot, due to my class schedule, I just can't do it. I also don't have the appropriate supplies to live in the encampment.
I have things like, of course, this focus group that I need to do. And if I want to be able to graduate or to have money, I can't be somewhere where I don't have Wi-Fi or a private space to be doing something like this.
Like the others say, I just have so many other priorities that just take greater than I know this is like a bad thing or like a horrible thing to say, but like something that's happening across the world.
I kind of don't appreciate how lax the rules are there. I feel like if you're going to protest and like live somewhere, I feel like you should, like commit to what you're doing, and you shouldn't be able to, play, yard games and like go and leave as you wish and please. Like I feel like that's almost like a mockery of the people who are actually suffering right now, and like the people who can't find a home and actually have to live in tents and actually are struggling. And I feel like that's a little inappropriate.
I have thought about it. I'm also scared of getting arrested and don't want to be in jail. I will show my support though by being in the encampment zone during the day and handing out supplies to the protesters. But yeah, I just think I'm too scared to be in the actual tent.
Only 4 support having protesters occupy buildings on campus. The others, like Angelina, explain why this is problematic for them.
Because the buildings didn't create the problem. And like my Wisconsin school personally is already underfunded and like at risk for being shut down. And we don't have the money or the funds. And that's going to make the tuition rates go up even more if we start destroying the resources that we have already.
Only 2 of these respondents think that these protests are anti-Semitic. Several of the others explained why they think that they are not.
Because Palestinians can be considered Semites as well.
Well, anti-Semitism is basically racism at the end of the day. But I don't feel like what um what these protests are doing is racist. It's more like there's a cause and effect, meaning that these protests are happening for a reason, not because they don't like Jewish people or people from Israel, but because of like what Israel is doing is wrong.
For most of these students, the situation in Israel and Gaza will not affect how they will vote in November, because many presume that Biden and Trump would handle it roughly the same way. That said, none of these students thinks that Trump would do a better job than Biden in handling the situation.
I'd say the military industrial complex just kind of influences every politician, especially the president. And no matter what, these wars aren't going to end. And whatever side we support, we're just going to send endless money because we benefit from war. And so I don't think Trump's going to be really much different.
Let's pivot now to the topic of TikTok and whether they think China poses a threat. 10 of these students use TikTok. 13 heard about the new law that requires it be sold to a US company or be banned in the US. Only 2 support this new law. 10 oppose it. Those who oppose it explained why and pushed back hard when I pressed them on the Chinese threat to the US.
Because I think there's bigger issues that we have to focus on, for one, and two, it's not really affecting anybody. Like for me, that's where I get a lot of my news. That's where I get a lot of stuff that's informed. And while it might not be all accurate, it might be strewed to one side or not, I still get it's still brought to my attention through social media.
Part of why I opposed it is I heard from my tax professor, who's who I found it out from, that it was buried within another bill and not even mentioned in the title of that bill. So they're just kind of doing it in secret. And I also just think it's anti-freedom.
They don't care that our data is being stolen. They care that it's being stolen by a Chinese company. If it was sold to an American company, nothing would change. They'd still be stealing our data. It just wouldn't be Chinese.
Is there a difference between a Chinese Communist Party owned company stealing your data and Facebook stealing your data?
No, they're all gonna sell it. It's a for-profit thing. Facebook's gonna sell it. They have been selling it. Google's gonna sell it. They have been selling it. The Chinese Communist Party, they're selling it. It's a business.
But just to be clear, isn't the Chinese Communist Party a strategic threat to the United States in a way that Facebook is not?
No, I don't view China as a threat. Their military is well, right now it's building up, but their population is ancient. They're dying. Like, they don't pose a military threat to us.
I feel like TikTok has done a lot of good for like smaller businesses and creators and provide a lot of opportunity and entertainment for people. And I don't think necessarily it's as much of a security risk as any other app or any sort of risk. I don't think it's like a major, like, this risk is way more than anything else.
I know the creator of, or the president or CEO of TikTok has pledged that that app is a safe space for creativity, for smaller business. It's also, I just believe, like TikTok, like Ethan said, isn't as big of a risk as any other social media out there.
So the Chinese Communist Party has access to a huge amount of data for more than 100 million Americans through TikTok. That doesn't worry you as a security risk to the United States?
Not necessarily, because I don't know what the United States is doing with our own data as well. I just feel like I have no idea what goes on behind the scenes, so I can't say I'm 100% certain in anything that is concerning social media.
So they're having TikTok controlling all this data and having, let's say, Facebook or Meta controlling all this data. They're the same thing in your mind? They're equal?
Yeah, I suppose I'm saying that, yes.
If the US government and the Chinese Communist Party both have access to the data, one's not riskier to you than the other?
Not really.
Okay.
I mean, you could argue that like the US has more of an incentive to protect and serve me, but I think at the end of the day, they just feed it to advertisers and they sell my data anyways, so.
The biggest surprise of the evening came when I asked them what they thought the biggest threat to their future would be. I expected to hear a lot about climate change. Instead, I heard this.
The national debt.
The national debt.
I believe the Social Security Fund.
Late stage capitalism.
Development of big corporations. Stuff like more monopolies, less small businesses, stuff like that.
A war.
Collapse of US infrastructure.
I also agree with money, especially in terms of scholarships, I guess, for future education.
I also say money, not being able to afford to live.
Yeah, I'd also say money, inflation, and the budget deficit that we're gonna have to pay eventually.
I would also say money, but more in terms of like retirement and social security.
I guess career opportunities and then like money for retirement.
I would probably say a dying and rigged economy that's against me.
I'm a fighting age male. Things aren't looking too good in the global stage right now. It's only a matter of time before someone does something stupid.
On that somber note, thanks for joining me this month. Please forward this link to a friend, and please join me again next month.